lot of kids that are trying to push that or toe the line, being like, "Oh, I'm totally working on art and chill." And I'm just like, there's too much white on that paper. I want to create color. But I'm going to write.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Where do you go to school?
Should I put these somewhere? Because I'm worried if I leave them, someone's gonna like take them. Thank you, but save it. I need to save a juice for Zion. Okay. I promised him a juice if he really works hard on it. All right, it is 2:30, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. If you are in this call, please feel free to keep your video and microphone off if you so choose. It is going to be recorded. I will keep an eye on the chat, and so if you have any questions or comments, please pop them in there. But for now, let's go ahead and get started with Library Advocacy 101. So my name is Liz Bondaghi, and I use she, her pronouns. I work in the Essex Westford School District. This is my 4th year in the district and my 10th year as a librarian. I spent the first 6 years of my career in Nebraska. So today we are going to be talking about some advocacy efforts. You can reach me on X and Threads if you so choose, and I work at the EHS CTE library. Okay. So we're going to start with how we currently advocate. And one thing that I really thought a lot about when I was putting this presentation together is the journey that I've taken on advocacy and the journey that we've all probably taken as we develop as librarians. So, for example, you could be currently advocating by having conversations. You could be currently advocating by inviting your principal or stakeholders in to watch you teach. There are lots of ways to advocate, and I don't think that there is necessarily a wrong or a bad way. As long as you are well-intentioned, I think that it's always appropriate to advocate for your library wherever you can. So our goal for the next 45 minutes or so is you will learn advocacy strategies to employ in advocating for your school library or program, and you will demonstrate your learning through the creation of a formal infographic. And let me just let folks in here. Excuse me. Great. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and get started diving into this. Again, this call is recorded, so if you would prefer not to be on camera, please turn your camera off. All right, so why advocate? That's what we're going to start with. Well, there are a lot of reasons to advocate and a lot of good reasons, and we're going to talk about some. So, first of all, libraries have changed. And as a result of that, your stakeholders, students, staff, school board members, community members, everybody that can touch your library, some of them probably hold some dated beliefs around libraries. And your advocacy efforts can change the perceptions of your library and of librarianship to kind of clarify some of those. More misty parts of librarianship that are hard to explain or hard to understand as somebody who does not do what we do day in and day out. And in addition to our libraries changing, our patrons have changed and will continue to change. And our libraries have been adapting to meet the shifting needs of patrons, and they aren't what they were 10 years ago. I know that to be painfully obvious, and I think it's best practice to go ahead and adapt and meet those needs. So I want to talk for a minute about what advocacy is not. Advocacy can sometimes feel like bragging. It can feel sometimes to me like I'm being annoying towards somebody. And it can also feel like one more thing on the plate that is heaped with things already that is our job. But I think it's really important to remember that regardless of how the act of advocating makes you feel, the result of you advocating is what you should be focused on. What advocacy is informative, digestible, and absolutely necessary. I would highly encourage everyone to please make time for advocacy and make regular time for advocacy, even though our plates are packed and we have very little time as it is. Advocating for your library means that people will have a better understanding of what's happening in and around your library every day, and that will result in more accurately held beliefs around what your library is, how it can serve your patrons, and how it can help your staff. So we're going to shout it out, not actually, but I want you to really be proud of the work you do. I used to get really stuck on advocacy, feel like I was tooting my own horn or bragging about what I do. But if you do it in a way that is factual and truthful, it's not bragging. It's you talking about what's happening around your library. So, in my opinion, the best advocacy efforts happen in two ways. Okay. So, you have formal, scheduled advocacy that you, there's some art programming going on in the library right now. So, you may hear some conversation in the background, but back to formal scheduled advocacy. This is something that I try to do quarterly. I mean, it would be wonderful if I could do monthly, but I just don't have the time for that. So I try to do this quarterly, and I will talk about what I do for that here coming up. The other best advocacy effort that I think of when I think about how I talk about my library is what I call on the fly advocacy. Those are those like shining moments of opportunity that just kind of occur throughout the day. Like when your principal is walking around the building and then stops into your library and you talk to him, that on the fly advocacy can be really, really powerful. And we as librarians need to harness those opportunities, those moments in which we can tell our story and tell it well. Okay, so so we're going to talk about formal advocacy first, and it's my hope that today you're not only going to come away with some ideas, but you're actually going to come away with a product. And because time is such a factor when it comes to how much we're able to do and how much we're able to put together, I've kind of built in a few moments in this presentation for you to get some work done as well. So I'm going to give you some tips for formal advocacy first. Tip number one is to schedule yourself some time at the beginning of each year to advocate. I was really generous with this. I said 2 hours usually. I can pull together my info in an hour and put it into an infographic. But what I want you all to do right now is open up your calendars. I'm going to set a timer. And I want you to, I want you to go ahead and schedule yourself an hour in the next month and a half sometime to go ahead and put together some efforts. So everyone take a minute. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to schedule yourself an hour, and I'm going to do the same thing in my calendar. So I know that Q2 and somebody else joined. Awesome. Q2 ends for me on, I think, the 21st. So I'm going to go ahead and schedule myself an hour. You've got about 1 minute and 15 seconds left. Okay. And welcome if you're just joining. This is a recorded call, so if you prefer not to be on camera, please do turn off your camera. Okay. About 30 seconds before we move on. Okay, so I hope you've scheduled yourself an hour. I'm going to go ahead and show you what I did. So this is finals week for us, and semester 2 begins here. So I'm going to go ahead and add that to my calendar so that I have that time set aside. And no one wants to listen to a big beep, so I'm going to stop that. And we'll go back to our presentation. So you've already done what I think a lot of people struggle to do when it comes to advocacy, and that's setting aside time. So tip number one, set aside time. Ideally, it's 4 times a year. Really, you can do it as often as you can. Okay. Tip number 2 is to ground your efforts in student voice, data, and research. So I'm going to talk for a minute about a study that I'm a really big fan of. It is from 2005, so it was literally 20 years ago. However, I think that this study has some frameworks in it that we can use to apply to our own libraries. So Dr. Ross Todd and Carol C. Kuthau published this 2-part study in 2005 in school libraries worldwide. And part 1 is all about how effective school libraries help students. So it's all about quantifying all of those little ways that we assist our patrons every single day. And I would highly recommend you give this a read. What it does is a huge study. They had 14,000 students in this study in Ohio, and they had a list of questions, and they surveyed their students about how their library does or does not help them. And what this study did really, really well is it centered our student voices and put what the library was doing in student words. And so I think this is one study that I have used repeatedly over my career. But I think one thing that you can do is you can go in, and these are some of the questions that they asked their students and their patrons. And you can use these questions from this particular study and survey your own students. Because at the end of the day, stakeholders, those really important people like school board members, parents, community members. They want to hear what the kids think too, because at the end of the day, we're here for the kids, right? And so if we just look at a couple of these questions, it was on a scale of like most helpful to a little bit of helpful. But for example, one of the questions was the school library has helped me know the different steps in finding and using information. They also had questions about the school library has a printer that I use regularly, or I asked the school librarian for a book recommendation regularly. This study is massive, and I would highly recommend you take some time to go look at this. But what I do often is I take these questions, pop them into a Google form, and then survey my students to center that student voice. And then my third tip for formal advocacy efforts is to use Canva. Hopefully some of you are familiar with Canva and have, and have access to that. I see that maybe we have a chat. Okay. All right, back to Canva. So you should have access to Canva for education, and that's actually what I'm using right now to present. But Canva is a wonderful website that has really powerful infographic templates, and I find it to be really easy to just go snag one of those infographic templates, pop my information into it, and then share it away. Okay. Our next tip, and we're going to make time for Canva and all that stuff, but mix up your qualitative and quantitative data. And so what I mean by this is include those hard numbers, also include student quotes, and include what students have enjoyed in your library over the last few weeks or quarter or semester. And what that does is that tells more of the library story. Like if you think about the library as a pie, you want like half of it, a chunk of it, to be qualitative and then the other half to be quantitative. I'm not a math teacher, but I always visualize percentages as pies. And this tells a more accurate story for you, more representative story of your library. So what should you include? This next screen, I of course will send out these slides and this recording, but this next screen, I noticed a lot of people wanted to take a screenshot of this the first time I did this, so prepare your print screen buttons. This is some of the stuff that you can include. I said include all the data, and then below that I said not really, just pick 5. One of the key points to effective advocacy efforts is that it's a digestible piece of information. And so my goal when I create infographics or formal advocacy things to share with my stakeholders, my goal is to be able to have them read it and digest it in like a minute. Because oftentimes they also have challenges with times. So what we could do, and I kind of color coded this, is anything in red, you can run a report in, I use Follett Destiny. If you use Opals, I was told that Opals actually does a better job of synthesizing this information than Destiny does, which is great. So if you are an Opals person, maybe shout it out. The other things you can include numeric data from your calendars. So like I keep track of the number of lessons that I teach in my Google Calendar, and then I count those collaborations up every time I do advocacy. So this is, anytime I've taught a class, anytime that a class was in our studio or our maker space, anytime I've collaborated, I count that. You can also pull information from your lesson plans. So like you could pull learning targets. If you assess, you could pull assessments or a model assessment to include. And then you can also get that qualitative data in there by surveying your students. So the two examples that I have would be like student quotes. Again, centering that student voice is so powerful. Or featured readers. So in the past, I've done something that I call featured readers, where I take a photo of a patron with their permission, and I say like, Sally is our featured reader for the month of November. Sally's favorite book is The Princess and the Pea. And putting that on there, putting a student face on there, not only like further grounds this in our students' experiences, but it also uh, is something that I find that they're really proud of. Like if you share this not only with your administration and all of those other important people, but sharing this with your students is really powerful as well. And they love to see themselves in a way that is talking about their library that's helpful. So now let's talk about what this looks like in real life. I've given you some tips. We've talked about some of what to include. We've talked about grounding our ideas in research. So let's talk about what this looks like. So for example, you could do presentations. What I have here are two presentations. One was from a couple of years ago. This is a very, very formal advocacy effort. The other one that I did recently, I did a presentation for, it was intended for the school board, on how libraries affect literacy achievement in our district. And what I did was I was going to use star data, but because they changed the benchmarks, I didn't feel that that was an ethical representation of our students' achievement. And so instead, I used some of the questions from the Ross Todd study, surveyed our students. We did a lot of work when it came to like how we're affecting student outcomes. And then I put all of that into a big presentation. And actually, let me talk about what happened with this, because I think it's important to be aware that sometimes things happen. So I put together this great presentation. I was really, really proud of it on libraries and literacy achievement in our district. And about a week before I was supposed to present this, I got word that my presentation had been postponed. And then once we got to the week that it was postponed to, I got word that it had been canceled altogether. And so I was disappointed, and I didn't want that effort that I'd put in there to go to waste. I wanted people to see this. And so what I did was I recorded a video of myself presenting, and then I sent the video, not the slides, just the video, to stakeholders in my district. So I sent it to the director of equity and the director of curriculum and instruction, sent it to the superintendent. And your school board members, more often than not, they want to see this stuff, even if it, like, especially if it comes from us. They want to know what's going on in the schools. And I think I would encourage you all not to be afraid to share this information with your school board members. All right, so I also do a lot of infographics. These were all made on Canva. So for example, this one here in the middle is very, very quantitative. It's just like quick facts, because that's literally all I had time for. Same with this one. But this here, I wanted to talk about these two infographics. So I did an infographic for the entire district of libraries, not just my library, but for like the whole district at the very end of the year. And what we did was we included a couple of things, like how many items we circulated, how many patrons we served. And then we also included some quotes and stories, and you can zoom in on this if you want to see more a little bit later. But, or actually, let's do it right now. Yeah. So if you look at this, we have our favorite, so like the librarian's favorite reads, and then our students' favorite reads. And then we included just short quotes. Like it could be as simple as I loved seeing the students and families at our annual cardboard challenge. Or it could be, pretty. Where is the one I want to share? Yep. Okay, so, or it could be pretty funny, like if anyone knows Caitlin Klassen, she wrote, "Class was over, so I had to stop reading aloud. The kids were so offended that I stopped at a cliffhanger that they told me, 'This is a crime, you are a criminal.' Gotta love teaching passionate readers." So, yeah, it was just a great mix of qualitative, quantitative, and a nice overview. And so that's what some of our infographics look like. Now, what we're going to do, I told you we were going to make time for this. You are going to do this. What we're going to do is I'm going to pop a link in the chat, and you're going to make a copy of this template. It's super easy, super fun. Okay, so go ahead and click on this link, please. And I'm going to pin this to the top. There we go. And it'll prompt you to make a copy. But what we're going to do is we are going to create one of these for you to have in your hand for tomorrow. And so there are a couple of data points that we will use. We're going to use quantitative data for this one. But if you wanted to put in, a quote from you or a student, that's absolutely something you should do. But otherwise, we're going to do the number of books and media circulated so far in your year, the number of classroom collabs that you've had, the most popular book, and the number of new books that you've acquired. I'm going to show you how to do all this. Now, if you don't feel like doing it right now, that's totally fine. Let's see here. But if you would humor me, you can work alongside me as I create this infographic. Okay. So what we're going to do, I'm not going to play this because nobody wants to listen to a video of themselves, is we're going to run some circulations. So hopefully this is something that you are familiar with. I'm just going to really briefly show you how to run this. And I'm going to start a timer for myself. So if you know how to do this already, you can just go do it. If you don't know how to do this, then I'm going to show you right now. Okay, so here I am in my Destiny Library Manager. I'm sorry if you're not a Fallout user. I don't have that knowledge. But what we're going to do first is we are going to run some circulations. So this is pretty simple. You're going to go to reports. And well, first you're going to log in. And then you're going to go to reports. Then you're going to go to library reports. And you're going to scroll all the way down to collection statistics historical. So I'm going to pause here for just a second. Okay. So what we're going to do is we are creating the infographic from the beginning of the year until right now. So there's just one piece of information you need to enter, and those are the dates that you want to run this for. So I'm going to enter August 1st because that is what is easy for my brain. And then the end date would be today. Now, depending on how you catalog in your library, you may want to limit this. If you catalog your curriculum books through Destiny or something like that, and you have a circulation type for that, you may want to deselect that. Totally up to you, though. I usually just put every circulation in that I've circulated, because even if it's a Chromebook, even if it's a camera, if it was circulating through my library system, that means a kid was in here accessing some sort of resource, and I want to talk about that. So I never feel bad for including those circulations. All right, so we're going to run this report. And once it is done, you just scroll to the bottom. It's usually a 3-page report for me. Perfect. So this is what the report looks like. What it does is it separates it by call number prefix. So if you are a call number prefix guru, you're going to have a long list of stuff. But at the end of the second page, there are your number of circulations right there. So I'm going to have you grab that number of circulations and pop it into that Canva infographic tab. So 3735, here we go. Okay, so I'm going to pop in my 3735. Okay. And let's see how we're doing on time. Oh my gosh, I have a whole minute left. That's beautiful. So I'm going to pause that, give you a moment to get that information from your circulation system. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go over to our calendars next. We're going to count up the number of classroom collabs that we've had. Another thing that I've heard people do that is also really powerful is like the number of instructional minutes that you've given this year or that your students have received. Like if you saw your kids once a week for the last 8 weeks and you saw them for 40 minutes, that'd be 40 times 8. And then, each kid is getting that number of instructional minutes from you. That's also a really great data point to include. But this one's really simple. I'm going to switch to my calendars and I'm going to start another timer. Okay, so I want everyone to take a moment and count up the number of classes you've collaborated with this year. So this has been my calendar. We started in September. So this is going to take me a minute. I'm not going to actually count up everything because that would take me a little bit longer than 3.5 minutes, but I'll count for a minute or two to give you all some time. Now, if you are on a fixed schedule, I know there are a lot of feelings about fixed schedules, but you are going to have a really easy time counting your collaborations because you know how many classes you teach every week and how many people you're serving. I'm going to give you about 1 more minute before we move on. All right. And then the next thing I'm going to talk about while you're finishing counting is I'm going to talk about your top and bottom titles. It can give you some serious insight into what's going on in your library to look at what is circulating the most and what's not, clearly. And so we're going to run a quick little report on that. Okay, starting my timer over. So to do a report on running your top titles, I've also recorded videos so that you can reference them later. But again, nobody likes to listen to their own voice. So we're going to run some top titles now. So again, we're going to go to library reports. And then we're going to scroll all the way down to the second from the bottom. So there's this top bottom titles report that you can run in Destiny, and it's really simple. So this is your screen that you're looking at here, and it will automatically give you what it considers the top titles. Then it'll give you the call number and the number of circulations. Now, this is the top 10 titles for the last 30 days, and what we're looking for is over the last few months. So December, November, October, September, August. So the last, I'm going to say 4 months. So you just change this to your desired time limit. And if you include circulations from in-library use, that will boost your numbers, but I usually don't include that. And also, I usually limit my top bottom titles by call number prefix. So I will run this report twice, once for fiction, or 3 times, once for fiction, once for nonfiction, and once for graphic novels. So once you have your time and the call numbers in here, you can click update, and it takes just a second, but then it'll give you your titles. And what I'd like y'all to do now is go ahead and take that top title. So for me, it's Fourth Wing, and then Good Girl's Guide to Murder. Pop that top title in to your collaborative document. That was, yeah. And I usually put a picture of the book because it's helpful for principals to visualize that. I also share all of these infographics with all of my teachers. Okay, so I'm going to give you about 30 more seconds to do that before we scoot on to the next thing. Hi, everyone. Today I'm going to show you how to run a report. The next thing that we are going to look at report-wise is the new books acquired report. And this is an interesting report because I don't run it very often, but when I do, I find it to be like something that I take pride in, because it's like, wow, we really did bring in X number of books, and connecting kids with books is just the best. So as we all know, that is something that we want to continue doing. Okay, so I'm back at it in Destiny again. And what we're going to do is I'm going to go to my report builder. Okay. So one thing that I wanted to try to do is give you all a file that you can upload into your own Destiny, so that you don't have to go and build this report yourself. So I have date acquired copies, and then I have a couple other things to show you. So let's go back here. And honestly, I need a little refresher because it has been a whole day. And I recorded this video not this week. There. Okay, cool. I know where we're going. Reports, library reports, title and copy list. Okay. So what we're going to do is we want the date that copies were added. And you want to put this after, so since we're doing first semester, I would do after August 1st. And I would say with all copies, because if you bought, say, 2 copies of the latest Diary of a Wimpy Kid, you want to count both of those copies. Or you can just do titles, but I usually do all copies. Now, if you want to sort something, I would definitely export this as an Excel spreadsheet. I just want the total number of copies that I got, so I'm going to leave it as a PDF, and then just run the report. Now, you can also include circulation stats for these. So if you wanted to do like a, out of all of our new books, this one's the most popular, check that circ stats box. So I'm going to go ahead and run this report, and then we'll grab the number of books that we've gotten this year. And we have received a lot of books this year. We have been heavy in the weeds getting our nonfiction updated, and getting our fiction cleaned up. Okay, so this is going to be a large report. You can see that my report is 152 pages. I just scroll all the way to the bottom because it's going to give you a total. And so we have 583 titles, 623 copies that we've added this year, which is a huge number. I know that that's unique, but that's where you would get that number. So go ahead and sorry, I realized I wasn't sharing that. There's my 583. Go ahead and take that number and pop it into your infographic now. Hi. Okay. And I'm going to give you about 30 more seconds to do that before we move on. Okay. All right. So you did it. Now the last step, if you feel like it, I would highly encourage you to do this. Email what you've created to all of your administrators. Bonus points for school board members, newsletters, and all staff emails. Now, if you, like me, have some anxiety about like what words to use in an email that doesn't sound braggy, or you want it to sound authentic and not like you're bragging, because you're not bragging. Remember, you are telling the story of your library. So I've got this email template here. This is what I use. I actually use the same one every time I send an email out, and I email my principals, my staff. I put it in the student newsletter. I include the school board members, the superintendent, all of our central office leaders, and the head of student services and counseling. But I've got a little checklist here. So I would encourage you all to please take a minute and email your story, your library story, out to some of your stakeholders. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds, and then we'll talk about informal advocacy. All right, informal advocacy tips. Here we go. The first tip that I have for you is that formal advocacy efforts prepare you for informal advocacy opportunities. The thing about informal advocacy is like it's not planned. And so you have to be ready to talk about your library when those opportunities kind of pop up. One example of this is we were looking for a new superintendent, and one of our school board members was holding some focus groups here in the library, and it was during the school day, and he came in and I wasn't expecting him, and I said, "Hey Marlon, how's it going?" And he said, "Oh, I'm good, how are you?" And we kind of made some small talk, and I said, "Hey, can I bend your ear for a minute?" And what I did was I had a printout of my latest infographic on hand, like it was on my desk. And what I was able to do was I was able to not only talk to him about that, but get his feedback, which was really, really wonderful. And so I would encourage you to keep a digital copy of your efforts in your computer's desktop, and then also print off copies and have those handy. All right, so that was also tip number 2. And I would encourage you to really know this data. Have it in your back pocket so that you can pull it out at a moment's notice. And then finally, be brave. Remember that you're not bragging, you're sharing what's happening in your library. And this makes for more informed stakeholders that understand and appreciate the work we do for all patrons. This is so important. And so I think for me, speaking from my personal experience, I had to kind of step over the anxiety of talking about myself in order to best serve my patrons. And that's what it is. Now, there are a couple of other resources I want to share with you before our time is done today. I've linked the advocacy toolkit here. This is from ALA. And this is a really, really great toolkit to kind of dive into really formal efforts. This is from about 6 or 7 years ago, but this is something that I did when I was in my last district. And what it does is it has like an annotated list of resources. So you don't have to go and do research about why libraries are important or why you should advocate or what you should advocate for because they've done it for you. They also have brochures and infographics that you can pull. So if you don't have time to pull together information about your own library, just go here. It's super helpful. It's a great resource, and I've used it a lot. And with that, I want to say thank you so much for attending today. Thank you for engaging with me. And I hope that you have something to take home or take back to your stakeholders to talk about all of the wonderful things happening in your libraries. If you'd like to connect with me, my email address is on the screen, and I look forward to hearing from you. And this recording will be posted unlisted on YouTube. So watch the listserv for the link. But otherwise, thank you so much for coming today. And I hope you all have a great day. I'm going to stop the recording now.